All right, so here I'm just cutting to where I'm starting to put the cowling together. You can see there's a piece that has two saw teeth edges on it, and I'm putting the front cowling on, just glued it bit by bit onto that sawtooth. And I thought everything was going sort of according to plan here. I'm going to end up, um, sanding this and priming it and repainting it, but I thought everything was going fantastically well here. But then things start to unravel because it turns out that sawtooth piece, it has teeth on the front and the back. And it's supposed to, I'm actually putting it in the wrong place. I'm thinking it's part of the cowling sort of width, but it turns out it's not, and I didn't understand that. Try to explain more later. Here I am getting the back part on. You can see there's four pieces that make this thing up. And it turns out that's not true. I'm dutifully trying to pull these tabs down to try to make them fit into the bulkhead area of the cowling, because right now I think I'm still on track. I don't figure out something's wrong until a little bit later here. Here I am. Now notice the back end there. See that it's not fitting. I can't make it fit, and it looks too long. At this point, I'm kind of getting confused. I also realized later that the bulkhead, so the one on the far left, you can see those little licks, little curve there. That's backwards. That I completely put that on inverted. So those are supposed to go the other way. So that's a problem. But this is not going together, and I'm really confused at this point.
Right.
Not really sure what's happening. So, trying to explain this, the parts are here. So the parts numbering is weird anyway. 39, 37, 37A, and 38. So it turns out the only parts that make the width of the cowling are 39, 37, and 38, not 37A. It's supposed to go under 37 and provide teeth and purchase for 39 and 38. So you can see in this picture, I got that piece backwards. But there's 37A that's supposed to go under that piece. So what I ended up doing was pulling the whole thing apart and just edge gluing things together. And I'll try to show you what happened, but poor plans and poor reading of plans, really.
Here's my second plan.
Okay, so there's the offending tooth paper. Pulled that out. And here's the finished cowling as is. You can see I fixed the back piece. It's in the correct orientation now. And it's going to be fine. It needs to be filled on the inside with some super glue or something, or epoxy, so that I can sand it and prime it and do all that stuff. But there's the directions showing those pieces. So now that I figured that out, I think we're going to be just fine. It'll work now, but my mistake. So I've taken all the cockpit sort of forward fuselage and rear fuselage pieces and put them on 1/32 balsa, glued them on there, taking care to know which way the grain is going, to see what makes sense, essentially. And now you begin sort of the tedious task of cutting these things out. So show a little bit of the process, and then I'll speed it up a little bit when it gets really boring. But the notion is these have to be very, very, very precise. Cut through multiple times shallow. Don't try to push it all the way through once, because you're trying to get through the paper, and then you got to get through the balsa. Especially when you're going through cross grain, you got to watch out because you will pull things apart. And these pieces are actually pretty complicated. There's little tabs you got to cut out, and there's holes for the tabs and slots. And what I would suggest you do is, like on these, the forward fuselage pieces, I would start with the tabs and slots first, and then cut the edges. Here I am cutting freehand because there's a curve along there. You're going to find when you paper model, there's a lot of times when there's curves, and you just got to practice cutting them. Go slow. Try to go methodical and sort of try to keep a flow going. Don't stop and jerk. make one sort of nice smooth movement around a curve, and it seems to go better, and go light and then heavier. So I sped this up because I'm just trying to cut out all these little slots, and all this is a bunch of me cutting. Sharp blade, absolute necessity. Sometimes you can use a straight edge on parts, sometimes you can't. You got to keep track of what's a tab and what isn't. At least one time on here I cut a tab off that I was supposed to leave on. Not the end of the world, it all glues together, but it's nice when the tabs work. Here I see I missed that little tab on the top. But you cut out all these things, and the more precise you are, the easier all your formers are going to fit. And there's a side, and you just got to keep doing that with all the rest. And there's quite a few to do. There they are. Oh boy. It goes pretty fast. Now, an old vac form modeling trick is take some blue tack and stretch it, put it on the part that you want to give yourself a handle, and then sand. In this case, I got to get these down to about 1 millimeter total. And with the 1/32 and the paper, it's thicker. Notice I turn the orientation around a little bit. I also sort of go clockwise for X number of turns and counterclockwise X number of turns to try to make things as even as I possibly can. It's not perfect, but you get close. And in this case, there's not that much to take off, but you can see I'm sanding for quite a while. You look at it, you make sure things are even. You try to make an even pressure. When blue tack sticks, you can just pick it off like that. Use itself to pick up little bits. Not a big deal. So you take out your calipers and you start looking, and you start to check and see. Up there, it's too thick there, too thick. In the middle, it seems pretty good. So I'm going to have to give this a little more shot because you want to have it, like I said, as accurate as possible. Otherwise, things won't fit. And just like woodworking, if things are off by a 72nd of an inch at one point, by the time you're done, they're going to be way off. So just sanding, getting ready to do this. It's much more fun to watch at high speed. But now I got to the point where this thing is ready, and what I have to do is do that with all the pieces, make sure they're all the correct thickness. Now I notice there's a little edge here that needs a little help, so I'm putting some pressure on it in specific places because it was a little thick where that one tab is, and that'll fix that right up, and she'll be ready to go. Now, I've got all these done beautifully. These pieces, there's a spade grip, and there's also a rudder pedal, and these are typical in that they're paper and they're folded over, so I cut them, made a fold in the middle, and they're going to be glued together. There's the rudder pedals. A couple extra pieces go on there too, but I'll put those things in later. But there I'm just kind of gluing the rudder pedal piece together, smearing some glue on it, folding it over, and squishing it so that it dries. And it's not a perfect rudder pedal, but in that deep cockpit in there, it's going to look actually pretty dang good. Spade grip looks good. It's well printed. I'm sure when I finally do cut it apart, it'll actually match. And that's been sort of what I've seen on this kit so far. Now I'm starting to sort of test fit some of these formers. So you follow the directions and you see where they're going to go. I'm just trying to show you so you'll be able to put these into these little slots. I got a front piece on there, and I'm showing these little pieces. You can see that is the rearmost bulkhead in the case, in that case, and that's going to stick right there, just to show you sort of what the plan is ultimately when this thing starts to come together, which it comes together pretty well. And I forgot, there's one more former 4, and that goes right there, so that I had to cut that out and get it ready. It's an important former. It's going to go right there. Based on, again, on the directions. And there are the directions I'm using. Shows everything exploded apart, how it all goes together. And you get all the pieces together and you're ready to go. So first thing I did was, along the fuselage sides, down near where the seat goes, there's 2 little pieces of wood that fit there. Put a little bit of glue, grab those little pieces, which again have been sanded to be 1 millimeter in thickness, and pop them on those parts. Same piece goes on the other fuselage side. You can see the white part where it's supposed to go. That's going to go above the cockpit floor, and I think near the seat itself. It might even be how part of the seat attaches, I'm not sure. Now, you test fit, always test fit, but now that everything's sanded and I cut it precisely, it fits great. It practically snaps into place. Add a little glue, and each time you do this, test fit first, then add glue. Don't just boldly go where lots of people have gone before and make a mess of it. Slide it in, make sure it's right side up. A lot of times the tabs are made so you can't mess up, but make sure. In this case, I believe they're supposed to be basically square, so I'm just making sure they're square as close as possible. And then I just keep fitting. There's number, well, first what number that is, but that's the piece that goes behind the seat. And so I test fitted it. It basically, like I said, snapped right into place. And then go ahead and added then I'm going ahead and adding some glue. And you don't have to put a lot on. And I'm using wood glue in this case because I figure it's got to be strong. I'm not using the tacky glue for putting on the formers. And when you get too much, you can take a little piece of wood and you can sort of smear off the excess. There's the part that goes under the machine guns, and there's the floor. And what I decided to do was add the floor to that former first and then put it all in at once, because you'll see there's a white line on that fuselage side, and that's where that floor is going to go. So I put glue in the appropriate places, and it has to go on the side as well, just to make sure that it's going to be nice and attach. So slide that in place. You can see it fits very well, and because I got the right thickness, it actually matches up with all the lines. If I left it too thick, it would be too high. Now I made it so that it fits really nice, and you can see there's globs of glue, but that's easy to remove with a Q-tip, or in my case, I'm using a bamboo skewer. Now I am going to put this in place where it's supposed to go, making sure that's straight. It'll also help when you actually put it together, because that will help kind of lock everything in place. So here I test fit it, slide it in, and much to my surprise, first time, it again basically clicks in, and once it's in, you just kind of fiddle with it to get it in the right way. See it slide right in really nice. And then just make sure that the floor matches up. You can see that little white piece is where the floor is supposed to go. So you can just sort of press that down a little bit till it overlaps, and there you go. So I know it's going to fit. So now the only thing to do left is to add glue and pop it in for real. So add a little glue on the tabs along the side of the wall, or the floor, and the front of the floor where it's going to butt up against that other former. And it's gonna look good. And again, it cut to the chase, it actually fits really, really well, which is quite nice. So far the kit has been fitting pretty well. The tails had to be adjusted, but and the cowling was, I think, really mostly my fault. Slide that in, and you can see it notches in very easily. And then you just make sure that your lines are lined up on the floor. And since I test fit it, it looks close. Give a little pressure so that the glue will set. And there's most of the formers. Now it's time to slide the other side on. And this is kind of important to do soon, because again, it'll help things remain straight and square. But you can see those slot in. The middle one goes in, and then the back one goes in. And with very little finagling, the whole thing slides together very well. So I'm pleased with that. Fits nice. It's square, sits on the ground flat. Really, I couldn't believe it. That's care and cutting. Adding glue and putting it back together. Now when you add glue to something, no matter how many times you test fit it, it doesn't usually fit perfectly. It's like it works great, and then you add glue, and the glue takes up space, and it's slippery, or maybe grabs. All kinds of little issues happen. So in general, this one happened to turn out pretty well, but you just play with it, and very carefully. You got time. It's not going to glue immediately. And you just start snapping everything in place, and make sure it all does what it's supposed to. And there, I think I got it. Fit really well, really the first time. Again, test fitting does a world of good. Here I got some extra goop, extra glue, so I'm just kind of smearing it out, getting rid of it with my little bamboo skewer. But there's the basic box. Looks pretty good. And the last place to put on is the front where the bulkhead's going to go for the engine. And I notice I have to cut out a little hole in the center. I didn't do that. That's going to be, I think, for a little shaft that will allow the rotary motor to spin, which is cool. So I cut it out roughly, and then I hit it with my bamboo skewer to make a nice hole. Add my glue. I've test fit this already, by the way. Just didn't show it to you. And slide that on. This was the trickiest piece to put on because the bulkhead, I made it, when I sanded it, it's a little thin, so it's kind of buckled in a couple of times. But it does fit just fine. Made sure that it matches up to the slots and make sure that they all go where they're supposed to. Kind of press on it to make it flat against the building board and re-ream that just to make sure you got a nice circle. And Bob's your uncle. That's the main tub. That one slot there is going to be where the instrument panel is going to go, and I'll just show you where it's going to slide in. Fits perfectly. That's where it's going to go when I glue it in place, but you know, there's a good mock-up of the start of the interior. So next we'll glue that piece in, and we'll start putting in the seat and the joystick and the rudder pedals and all that stuff. Really a neat little job.